Hello, everyone, and welcome to the newsletter for November 8th. We're going back to the heartland and talking about Decred because we finally managed to get some green candles under our belt, which is well and truly overdue. This thing absolutely deserves to be repriced, and I'm really hoping that this is it. So far, it's looking very promising. There's volume on the move, and with the 1.6 hidden Hydra release in the near horizon, or soon.tm as Decred does best. Hopefully we can stick this landing and really make this thing count. So in today's newsletter, we're going to go through some of the features. I'll talk you through where I think this space is going, what to really look forward to, what to think about for this consensus vote that's coming up, and just what it's going to look like. And then we'll flick over to the privacy wallet, and I'll show you around and just have a look at, what's going on, some of the features as I've kind of seen it. I'm still playing around with Lightning Network, haven't quite got my head around it just yet. But we'll certainly have a look through the wallet and just see, particularly on the privacy front, what that all looks like. So these are the levels that I've been trying to meme into existence. We've managed to finally reclaim the 200-day moving average, which quite honestly is... of all the levels to be down the bottom, I'm pretty happy that the 200-day is the first one that we've taken out, because that's the thing that technical analysis is going to look at. So if we come back down and get a 1449 retest on the 200-day and get a strong bounce off that, happy days. The next point is the realized price. So we came up to $16 earlier today, and we punched through it and then obviously got rejected back down. $16 would be your next move. Then we're looking at the block reward price. So this is essentially where the entire network is back above water on a USD basis. The next stop would be the $35 mark, where we're talking about the 142-day ticket sum. So by the time we get to there, assuming that we don't get a magic candle and punch right through it right now, I suspect that this will start to increase as more people start putting tickets into DCR, particularly up to this consensus vote. But somewhere around the $35 mark would be where stakeholders are currently valuing the chain. And then just for a bit of a laugh and, ideally an insight into the future, when we start eating Litecoin at its current valuation, that would be a 10x from the 142-day sum. So, happy days, and stay optimistic. Hopefully we can stick the landing. So Decred's rapidly becoming what I like to call the Swiss Army knife of sound money. After batting around many an idea, I kind of feel like this is the most well-rounded approach to what Decred actually is. And it's got the hyper security. It's got this innovative base layer that the hybrid proof of work, proof of stake gives it. It's self-funded, which allows it to build things like DCR decks, which don't necessarily have a profit motive, and to be honest, make the world a better place, which is honestly why I support the chain. This DAO governance that's really going to start taking hold now that we move into the treasury decentralization is really exciting. This is something that really, I think stakeholders have been looking forward to this for a very, very long time. The privacy solution, which I've played around with, it's just excellent. It's so seamless, it's so cheap, and it works a treat. There's still some things that are being resolved on the UX front, just making it a little bit more user-friendly and easy for people to understand what's going on. But by and large, it's pretty happy days right now with the privacy solution in terms of the technical side. Adaptation, just the ability to actually evolve and change as we go is, I think this is a massively underappreciated element of Decred. We're going to see how Bitcoin fares trying to implement Taproot. That'll be interesting. I'm certainly curious to see how that evolves, but I don't know what comes after Taproot. Although, at least at the Bitcoin base layer, one thing that is very exciting is Lightning Network. And this week's podcast recommendation is about Lightning. I think I need to do a serious deep dive on Lightning, because my feeling is that it's actually going to be far bigger than what people expect, which is quite exciting. So we'll talk through that. So scalability with Lightning is good. And interoperability. DCR Dex is now live. It's got bigger order books than Binance and Bittrex combined. So to be honest, it's pretty happy days on that front. It's still pretty clunky when it comes to UI and installing and all that kind of business. So it's not quite for the plebs like you and I, but it will certainly get there with time, and you won't need to run full nodes, and you can use SPV mode and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it will get there, but it's certainly extremely promising what I've seen, considering the level of censorship resistance that the DEX has managed to achieve. So I just wanted to touch on this table that I've been mulling this thing over for some time, but this is where I'm trying to understand and rationalize in my head what the differentiation factors are. And some of this is inspired by Murad Mammadov's podcast on Decred in Depth. But if we use Bitcoin as our reference implementation, say, okay, if something's going to survive long term, it's got to compete with Bitcoin, but it's got to be different, right? And if you just, let's go from left to right here. If we look at Litecoin, it also has deterministic halvings. It's got 100% miners. It's got ASICs now. It's got rough consensus. It's got donor models. I don't even know if it has coin joins, to be honest. The only thing it really does is because it's smaller, it can fork. So, Litecoin is just the worst hedge on the market. I mean, maybe Bitcoin Cash is probably below it, but I just don't understand the valuation of Litecoin, and I never have. And you can kind of see in terms of what it offers, there's nothing really on the table. If we look at something like Zcash, yes, it has the donation model. Another side podcast recommendation would be with John, I think it's Cincinnati. It's an Italian name, but on the Brink. So the on the Brink podcast, I think it's the latest one. They talk about the governance model of Zcash, and I loved listening to it as a fascinating podcast. But I really wanted to put my phone out the window, and I was listening to it so many times because they're describing all these, in inverted commas, innovations in Zcash governance. And it just was complete garbage. I mean, Decred has done this so much better for so much longer. And they're talking about all the problems and the challenges that Zcash overcame. And they're workshopping the ideas about the solutions. And my head is screaming, but this already exists. And I'm slowly actually starting to come to terms with why Decred's actually getting ignored by so many of these media outlets. Apparently, Ditto, if any of you remember Ditto from about a year ago, it was the PR group. They have been shit-talking Decred to Masari, to The Block, to a whole bunch of different outlets. So it's starting to take a little bit of shape as to why Decred's been flying under the radar. It's because it's literally being pushed under the carpet. So mission at the moment is to try and break that curse and improve to the point where they can't ignore us. But anyway, sidetrack on that. So with Zcash, I mean, it's also it's got the founders reward, but ultimately that's kind of going through a process of being captured. That was supposed to terminate in year 4. They've now extended that for another 4 years, and it's really starting to look like a little bit of a seniorage type. Not ideal scenario, right? The social contract is now changing in favor of the founders in Electric Coin Company, and it's just not really a favorable thing. Obviously, they have a superior privacy implementation to Bitcoin, but again, it's an optional system. If you were going to go for a privacy type system, you can see here the number of ticks that Monero has. It just is far superior in my eyes to Zcash. Who knows if Zcash is going to go for a run because its halving is in 11 days, but I would certainly be opting for Monero just based on the differentiation level. So for Monero, they've obviously hedged to some extent the pure proof of work with ASICs. They're going down the CPU mining path. They're trying to keep that very, very decentralized mining path. Who knows if that's sustainable long term? I mean, history would say probably not. But RandomX seems to be holding up for now, but whether that's a long-term solution. But ultimately, the Monero project has, they're able to hard fork. They've got a social contract of hard forking in changes. But in general, Zcash and Monero both are rough consensus models. They don't hedge anything on the governance layer really to a great extent, except for, their size and ability and social contract to hard fork. Monero has a strong donor model, so that's similar to Bitcoin with donors and sponsors and things. Obviously, Monero privacy blows all of these coins out of the water. It's second to none. But if we now look at our friend DCR on the right-hand side, it hedges the monetary policy in the way that it's distributed. It hedges the machine consensus. It combines proof of stake and proof of work, so it's a two-factor system. At the governance layer, it has a formalized governance rather than rough consensus, right? 2 ways to skin a cat. If you look at things like protocol change activation, it's not limited to soft forks. It can do controlled hard forks. It can a combination of off and on-chain voting. It can, implement dormant code. So while Bitcoin has to work out how in hell it's going to roll out Taproot across the entire network without causing a split or a fracture or some other thing, Decred just uploads all the nodes, and then we have an on-chain consensus vote, and it either gets approved or rejected. So nice, clean, and relatively risk-free. And from protocol funding, it's got the treasury, which allows it to be basically self-sovereign and bootstrap itself. And the privacy implementation, it's a hedge to some extent. I've given it a yellow tick, moderate hedge, because it's a far better coin join solution to the Bitcoin one. It solved the liquidity problem. The anonymity set is just incredible. and on a cost per basis, I think it's 300 sats or 300 atoms to do a mix, which, compare that to 300 sats. It's a standard Bitcoin transaction. If you look at the fees, a Bitcoin coin join will cost you $15. And that's, even if you were to bump Decred up to the price of Bitcoin right now, we're still talking about a cent rather than $15 per coin join, and getting far better liquidity and anonymity set. So in terms of differentiators, there's every reason why I'm bullish Decred. Again, the market likes to prove me wrong on these things, but I certainly have high conviction, and I feel like this is a turning moment. So again, hopefully we stick the landing. So just a quick touch on blockchain governance, just before we get into what the consensus vote will look like and what you need to be paying attention to when the consensus vote comes out. So governance is always present, even for Bitcoin. It's just generally poorly understood. And it's essentially the process of going from the human social contract where we debate, negotiate, establish what's going to go into the code. Are we going to change the consensus rules? Writing it, getting it reviewed, going through all that negotiation. How you go from that human layer to the code, and then from the code to roll out and deploy it into the machine consensus layer. So for Bitcoin, this whole process can take many years. I think Taproot's been going for about 4 years now. They're expecting about a 4-year rollout time frame. It's been 3 years since SegWit was rolled in, and I think that's like 65% adoption. So that's still got a long way to go. So you can see there's a long process with proof of work, whereas for Decred it's pretty much going to be about a 3-month process, 6 months if you include all of the upgrades, and between now and then it'll be about 6 months, and then the treasury will be fully decentralized, assuming the vote gets approved, which I think there's probably a pretty good probability that it will. So the Decred governance, or the process to consensus here, is that we start with Politeia. So the decentralized treasury's gone through all of its development funding. I'm actually, just for reference, I'm looking forward to seeing what Marco puts on as his next proposal. To be honest, I'm kind of more excited than the treasury for that, which is something else. I just want to see where they're going with the project next. Politeia is where we negotiate all the proposals and establish what's going to get funded and built out. Once that's all been built, so the code is now established, its code has now been reviewed, it's baked in a dormant state into the node software. So when we all upgrade to version 1.6, the dormant code that will have the treasury opcode is inside the node. And what's going to happen is that the miners and the stakers, so if we look on the right hand side here, the first step in this consensus vote is that the miners and the stakers need to upgrade the node. So the mining code needs to be running at 95% upgraded. So that means that the dormant code is inside the miners. And the stakers, likewise, every time you buy a ticket, so every time once you've upgraded to 1.6 and you buy a ticket, it will register as a 1.6 active ticket. So until 75% of the stakers have upgraded their node and then bought their next ticket, that's when it will go into once you get that criteria, 95 miners, 75 stakers, it will then activate the on-chain vote. Within Decrediton, you will then hit yes, I want to approve, or no, I want to reject the treasury upgrade. Now, me personally, I'll be voting to approve. Ultimately, I can't review the code. I doubt many that listen to this will be able to review the code. So we are trusting the developers. If you're not trusting the Decred developers, you shouldn't be holding DCR. I think that's kind of the crux of it. These guys are some of the best engineers in the space, if not in the world. Ultimately, this is kind of one of those trade-offs that, we trust the Decred developers, we trust the Bitcoin developers, we trust the Ethereum developers, we have to. So this is all part of the trust model. But ultimately, the amount of review and the time it takes, there's a reason that Decred has a saying called soon.tm, because everything takes a bloody ever, because it spends so much time making sure that it's absolutely high assurance. So as far as that goes, it seems like a fairly sensible thing, to approve it. So I'll take you through the wallet so we can see what that looks like. So what's actually coming out? So Hidden Hydra is the name that I've lovingly given it. Adopted from one of the other community members, but I kind of spearheaded actually just giving it the name. So we've got Lightning Network coming out on mainnet. So it's out on mainnet for some time, but now it's going to be inside the wallet. So there's a few of us who are going to start testing it out and just sending atoms around, seeing how it works. The DAO treasury, so basically converting the treasury to a full decentralized and seeding it from the the company zero multi-sig to being approved by stakeholders. So stakeholders will need to approve every spend. The DCR DEX is obviously out and ticking over. Pretty impressive that it's actually got more volume than Binance and Bittrex combined. So I'll show you the order books shortly so we can actually see it in action. And the CoinJoin implementation, which we'll run through in detail inside the wallet. So Lightning Network. So Lightning is a scaling and innovation layer ultimately, and scaling is what everyone thinks it is. Innovation is what it actually is. So it's essentially a second layer payment channel. So this is a pathway to scaling blockchains. Raiden Network was supposed to be the payment channel for Ethereum. No idea what happened to that. What you end up doing is opening up a channel. It's kind of like an abacus. So if you open up a channel to somebody, you have a certain number of beads on your end. And when you send a payment to someone, you will send your beads to the next node, and then they will route your payment to the final direction. You can obviously open up a channel directly to somebody else, and then you can send your abacus beads to them. But essentially, it's about moving value on kind of, if you imagine strings pulled between each and every node, and you're sliding beads representing how many sats you want to move around across. So if you want to send a payment to, Bob wants to send it to Carol, he will route through Alice. So he will move 5 atoms or 5 sats to Alice. Alice will then move 5 of her sats to Carol, right? So it'll be this chain of events. So that's what a channel basically is. It provides basically near instantaneous transactions. So they are pretty much lightning speed. Only Bitcoin, Decred, and Litecoin have Lightning Network, and of those, Litecoin is pretty much just change a number, adopt Bitcoin's Lightning. So it's very easy to implement. But Bitcoin and Decred actually have active movement going on Lightning. And what's really fascinating, and we'll talk about this at the end in the podcast recommendation, is the innovation layers that can be built on top. So there's things like futures and derivatives markets that are coming into the mix. There's things like I was listening to called shadow chains, which are actually basically, quite honestly, they sound like Ethereum killers. Quite honestly, and it's basically the ability to write full smart contract side chains, but on Lightning Network. I need to look into this, so certainly expect a full deep dive on the Lightning technology that's coming, but things like developing Bitcoin or Decred yield curves and all sorts of financial applications, it's very, very exciting stuff. I did not realize that Lightning was headed down this path, but it very much sounds like a underestimate in 2 years, overestimate in 2 years, underestimate in 10. And I think we're at the 2-year mark, so I'm excited to see what the next 10 years look like. Obviously, it's a long time, but it sounds like Lightning is really a piece of technology for the ages, and it's probably going to happen faster than we think. The CoinShuffle++ implementation. So really, this is about making UTXOs fungible and breaking the history of them. The Decred version is cheap, super liquid, and your peers are randomized because tickets vote on a random basis. It's currently doing about 125,000 DCR a day, which is about 1% of the supply. I'll be interested to see when the full release gets done what this is going to spike up to. I suspect it's going to be pretty much higher than 125. And really, it's maintaining that balance between an auditable chain, but also preserving privacy. So, it's a really, really cheap and effective system. Again, we've got this whole risk going on about regulators and tainted coins and so on and so forth. But, we'll see how this all pans out. I do wonder whether once it's passed through as a ticket, whether it, being a ticket kind of cleans itself. I'm not sure. We don't know where this is all going to go. But, we have DCR DEX, which has greater liquidity anyway. And, the world is going towards DEXs, so I'm actually becoming less and less worried about this problem because I think that centralized infrastructure is on the way out, to be honest. And DCR DEX being ideally something that can actually start superseding centralized exchanges, trustless, feeless, peer-to-peer atomic swaps. I believe that eventually this can be ported over and used on Lightning Network, which is super cool. I'm not expecting that anytime soon, but I know that it probably can happen. At the moment, it's what's called an MVP release, or it's relatively beta. It's pretty hard to install. You still need full nodes on Bitcoin and Decred. So it's still a bit of a barrier to entry for you and I, but over time, it's going to get better. They're going to introduce SPV wallets and things like that. Any coin can integrate themselves into DCR DEX. The engineers just need to list it and do some integration work. There's no centralized custody, there's no fee, there's no DEX token. Anyone can run a market client. So it's pretty cool where this is all going to go. I'm excited to see more projects implement DCR DEX, use it as their back end to facilitate swaps, maybe moving coins in and out of Ethereum, or who knows where it's going to end up. But I really do hope that the market starts to really use it as a tool as it is, as a trustless bridge between value chains. And then the piece de resistance is the decentralized treasury. This is the beating heart of the Decred network. It's the centerpiece of the chessboard. And what's being introduced is what's called the T-Spend consensus rule. So this is a specific opcode. So an opcode, for those who don't know, is basically a type of transaction or a script. Bitcoin has opcodes. You may hear, pay to script hash and pay to pub hash and things like that. They're basically various transaction types, like a multi-sig is different to a single sig opcode. So the T-Spend is a new opcode that the Treasury will move to that requires explicit approval for the stakeholders to spend it. So what will happen is the same contractor management system will get put together. The invoices will be prepared and grouped into basically a big pool of funds or a transaction. And what will then happen is the stakeholders will vote and say, yes, we can spend this, right? We approve this global invoice, and then it will get spent. So until stakeholders actually vote and say, yes, we want to spend, the Treasury cannot be spent. So it's essentially ceding the multi-sig from the developers to the tickets. And this essentially makes Decred a full layer 1 DAO. I'm curious to see how this looks in terms of approving the invoice, how much visibility we actually get of each of the invoice. I think there's going to be a whole lot more transparency of what's going to be lumped into the invoices. But anyway, this is huge. This is a piece of code they've been working on since Decred launched. So this really is stepping into a new field of unstoppable. It is really quite exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing it play out. So our friend Decred soon to release a full-featured, long-awaited major release. The Treasury really has been the centerpiece of Decred's chessboard, and the seeding of it to the ticket pool is I think it makes it the most unstoppable layer 1 DAO. I don't know of anything else that has this kind of feature set. Obviously I'm bullish as an understatement. This is something that it's near and dear to my heart. It's something I believe needs to be repriced if there's any common sense in the world. And if there's ever going to be a momentum shift, this is surely going to be it. And I am thankful to see the green candles that we're getting. That is actually outrunning all of its peers, the Litecoins, Moneros, and Zcash. It's currently outrunning those, so that's a really promising sign coming off this bottom. So hopefully the bottom is in, and it's greener pastures from here. So this is a wallet that I've got set up just to show you some of these features and how they actually work. So most of the features, it's more or less what you'd all be familiar with. In terms of tickets, so they're going to be moving around. So some of you may remember, let's go is legacy. If any of you have bought tickets, you'll remember this screen. I've got to put APIs and things, but the legacy screen you can still use. So at the moment, I'm still using my legacy VSPs. However, in the new version, you will essentially be able to select a stake pool. You will not have to sign up for them. What they've implemented is so at the moment, you may have noticed that every time you buy a ticket, your coins go to the same address. So if you're using the same VSP, for every VSP you have, it's the same address. And you may have heard from the many podcasts on the matter, address reuse is not a positive. It's not a good thing for privacy because obviously the same address is the same person. So it's always linking your data. So what doesn't make sense is if you do a big privacy mix and you make all of your UTXOs unique and then you send them all to the same address you've been using for the whole time for your tickets. It kind of defeats the purpose. So what you can basically do, and as Stakey.net's the only VSP that's currently upgraded their code, but there will be a whole list of different VSPs that you sign up for. And every time you send a ticket, it will go to a new address. And this is essentially creating a greater level of privacy, and you will be able to do so from your mixed account. So let me touch on that in a second. So what this is basically saying is you can change your VSP on the fly whenever you want. You don't need to sign up with an email or any of that. You basically just pick a VSP, hit purchase, and away it goes. And it will go to a new address every time. So it's improving that privacy side to actually purchasing a ticket, and it won't link all of your tickets together over time. So now if we apply the backdrop of all the coins that are going into your privacy, into your tickets, if they're all mixed at the same time. So if we now go to the accounts tab, when you first boot up a wallet, you won't have all of this. You won't have this mixed and unmixed. There'll be a button to say, would you like to enable privacy? You hit yes. And what it will create is a mixed account and an unmixed account, right? So at the moment, I've transferred this 17 DCR into this unmixed account. If I go to transactions, you can see that I can only spend from my mixed account. So it will not let me spend from my other account because it's technically unsafe, right? It's not privacy mixed. You can do send funds to another account, which will now allow me to, if I need to move it from my default or my unmixed, you can still move things around between your accounts, but sending to an external account, it's trying to prompt you to do your mix before you send your coins to it to create that anonymity set. If we go to the privacy tab here, now this is kind of where the magic all happens. So now that we've deposited funds into our unmixed account, which again, you could go transactions, receive, unmixed. This is essentially what I did just before I started recording. I sent in this 17.5 DCR. So now I go to my privacy account. It's saying mix my change account. So this is the stuff that is unmixed or is your doxic change. This is the account where it's going to mix to. So you can kind of think about this thing like a big water filter. You're putting your unmixed UTXOs in one side. It's going through the whirlwind and getting spun around and mixed. And then it's coming out as unique denominations into a brand new account. And there's no idea who is who in that entire process. So if we turn on the auto mixer, so you'll see up here that we now have a mixer running. So what that's now doing is, let's go back to our accounts. That's going to slowly take this 17.55 and every time a ticket gets purchased, so there's a process of every block, there's going to be a bunch of mixers that get run. So each 5 minutes, there's going to be a process where some of your coins are going to get taken and automatically spent. And it's going to go from your mixed account through the mixer into your from your unmixed, mixed into your mixed account. So this may take a little while because we've got to wait for basically each block and they're 5 minutes. So while that's waiting, we'll see the transaction pop up when it actually does something. Let's look at our Lightning Network. So for Lightning Network, now be very, very conscious that Lightning Network, whether it's Bitcoin or Decred, is still quite some way away from user-friendly adoption. This is early beta technology. This is just starting to scratch the surface. So the UX, the user experience of Lightning is not great right now, and that doesn't matter whether you're on Lightning or Decred. Lightning Network has a pretty average user experience. The user interface that Decred has built is exceptional. So it's not a great user experience for Lightning yet, and eventually all of that will get abstracted away, but for Decred at least they've made it look pretty and fancy. So the difference with Lightning is when you open channels to people, and you open channels to routing nodes and all the rest of it, because that's not on the chain, it's not on Decred, you have your initial opening transaction where you open the abacus, but your balances and everything else has to be saved in a separate backup file. Now, naturally, Decred does all of this in the background, so you don't need to worry about any of this unless you go and rewrite your computer. So if you go and rewrite your computer and you move your wallet between things, in order to get your funds, you'll need to keep this backup key. So let's go understand, accept risks. Create new, start and unlock LN wallet. So this is creating for the first time. Right, so it's booting up DCR LND, which is the Lightning Network daemon. And here we are. So you'll see that in accounts, we now have a Lightning Network account. So if we wanted to fund a channel, so the way that Lightning works, and to be fair, I'm still trying to work this all out. By the way, here's your backup location. So it will save this all automatically. and we'll save it on a consistent basis. But you know, again, ultimately, you really shouldn't have to worry about any of this because you know, we won't be using Lightning just yet. It'll take some time before we're probably at the stage where we can start sending things around. And the more I play around with it, I'll give you more feedback on it. So this is your node ID, and there's a node alias as well. Now, you'll need, in order to create channels to people, you'll need the node ID and the IP address, which again, you know, we're starting to see that there's a few barriers to, you know, people say, what's an IP address? And it's a good question. So there's a lot of user interface things, but ultimately a lot of this stuff will get abstracted away, and you'll start seeing your node you'll just hit a button and it will automatically link up to channels, and, you know, the user experience will get better with time. You'll have what's called your on-chain balance. So these are the coins that you can send from your, for example, you could go from your, well, you wouldn't want to do it from your unmixed, you do it from your mixed account into your Lightning Network. You could send some sats across. In fact, why don't we just do that? Yep, so that's going to transfer funds. So total balance, we've got 0.1, which is currently being confirmed on chain, unconfirmed balance. That will eventually move to our confirmed balance. So all you're seeing in the top here is your on-chain balance. Now, you'll then go through the process of opening a channel. So at the moment, I don't have any channels that are open. If you were to put in a node ID at IP, you would then create a channel to that person. That now means that you can send them value. If they were to give you an invoice, and again, a lot of these screens kind of look the same, but they can send you an invoice and say, this is an invoice to pay 0.01 DCR. You can then move however many atoms that is from your abacus over to their abacus. So you can send that value from you to them. Likewise, they can also set up a channel back to you, and then you can have two-way conversations. And if you set up a channel to, for example, what's called a routing node, or one of these big, think about it like an exchange. If you were to, and exchanges will probably do this, they will be routing nodes. You would send your value via the routing node, and they will take a small cut as it goes through their channel, you know, a sat or two sats or something like that. So you'll be able to route from yourself to a routing node, which could be some central hub, and then they will redirect your payment across to whoever your counterparty is. So you can connect to different nodes via other nodes. And on the network, you can actually see, you can start querying these nodes if you have another counterpart. Actually, let's see if, give me 2 seconds. I should have a node somewhere in the mix here that someone's given me. Okay, and we're back. Sorry, folks. That took a little bit longer than expected. We'll come back to Lightning Network because as I mentioned, the UX is still not quite there. I'm still finding my way around it. But what I wanted to show you is two things just before we close out. The first one is this first mixed transaction has gone through. So you can see here that there's a whole stack of addresses, and we'll look at the actual transaction as it is. But you can see here that it's taken my 17.45 DCR. My wallet outputs is a 1075 and a 672. And you can see here, these are all non-wallet outputs. So these are somebody else's who's also participated in the coin join. You can see there's a 1073, 1073. So this means that the mix was a 10.73 mix, right? That's the denomination. If we go back to my accounts, you'll see that I now have 10.73 has moved from my unmixed account, which used to have 17 point, whatever it was, 17.4. It's now moved that into the mixed account. So that 10.73 is now a fungible UTXO that can now be spent, and essentially, even if this gets mixed into my mixed account, you can still combine those UTXOs because there's no determination if multiple people perform in the mix. Even though you're gluing UTXOs together, it still is a higher level of privacy than if you didn't perform it, because it could be anybody who's linking those two together. So that's essentially what's going on. Let's take a quick look at the actual transaction on the Block Explorer. And you can see here it's mixed 18 outputs of 10.73. The total fee for the whole thing was, what is that, 3,000 or 35,000 sats. So 0.005 USD. Now, naturally, if that increases with price, now what are we at? 1,600. So if we times that by 1,000 times, we're going to be up towards the Bitcoin price. So we would go, what, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be a $50 mix. If Decred was Bitcoin's price right now, that would be a $50 mix between all parties. So that kind of gives you a bit of a scale. And for me personally, the fee that I paid was 0.253, so 2,500 sats. So that would roughly be, I think, $1 or maybe something less than $1, maybe $2 or something like that. So that gives you a bit of a scale on kind of where this is going. And you can see that it's mixed 18 outputs of 10.73 DCR. And here's all those mixed outputs. And you can see that there's a whole number that's gone in, these 29s, these 19s, these 32s. And there'd be a good chance that if we jump back on any one of these, you'll probably find that a number of these have actually come themselves from a mix. So this is somebody else's previous transaction, and this has also come from a previous mix. And you can see we're talking about 4 cents to mix the whole lot. So that gives you a bit of an idea what's going on there. And this is the aggregated order book. So if you're on DCR Explorer, you can jump to this one here and go market, and this will show you the aggregated order book of all of the exchanges. So you can see we've got Binance in yellow, Bittrex in pink, DCR DEX in blue, and then Huobi in purple. And what's really interesting here, so if you look at the meshing point, let's actually just go to Binance, for example. So Binance makes a lot of sense, where you're basically getting this meeting in the middle of price. You can't get this kind of overlapping. Huobi as well. Bittrex as well. Once we go to the aggregated with DCR DEX, you can see that all of Binance and Bittrex and Huobi are all, here's Huobi up here, they're all finishing, right? They're even order books, right? They're meeting at the price. Look at DCR DEX in blue, how the buy side is way higher, right? The buy side is actually pushing up liquidity and trying to pay a premium. So the actual price of DCR right now is at 0.00112, right? So we're seeing something around here. You can see the Binance sell side starts here, but you can actually see that the buying liquidity is pushing up to 0.014. And that's suggesting that there is actually a premium being bid on the DEX. So I'd love to see how this kind of pans out over time. But this is overall, this is pretty promising that people are actually getting on there and trying to, they're taking that privacy premium of bidding on a DEX rather than going onto a centralized exchange. It's going to appeal to a certain set of people. So again, I'm looking forward to getting on the DEX and playing around with it a little bit more. I know there's probably a lot in there. There's a lot going on in the Decred space, which is pretty exciting because it doesn't happen very often. I will keep you well and truly updated as the consensus vote and as the new code and things come out. So most certainly, you'll be hearing from me more and more. I'm pretty excited. I hope we start getting some serious price action. What I'm super excited about actually is, hang on, I just threw out a tweet just before because happy days. As I was recording this, we managed to knock out the realized price. So that was at $16 and what was it, $16.18. Where are we now for DCR? No, $16.50. So, I mean, these are the best green candles I've seen in some time from our friend Decred. So let's hope we can stick the landing. I'll see you in the chat room. I'm going to be letting you all into the on-chain masterclass for the first round. Please give me your feedback. Let me know the level that you think it's at.